Alright, welcome to another edition of LEG TV. Holy cow, we're at week 11, and it's been a while since I've done one of these, admittedly, because, you know, I get basically zero in return from all these wonderful members of the league. Anyways, we have some very, very important things to address here. Number one, yes, I will shave this beard. But number two, we have an unbelievably competitive season this year, again for the second time in a row. We have 11 teams, sorry Austin, 11 teams trying to get those playoff spots. There's only 6, and we're going to run down who is in, who is on the cusp, who's the bubble team, and some long shots here. So as you can see the records here, obviously Dan Nichols all but secured a spot here in the LEG TV, or LEG standings here. Now really, 7 wins is the magic number to get into the playoffs here, and I have a feeling there's going to be some 7-win teams that are not going to make the playoffs. That is just sad. We see also all the way at the bottom there, rookie Austin Stoll, not doing so well. But let's go to the playoff reviews here. So we've got 3 weeks left. All games are must win for a lot of teams, very important matchups. Let's start with some of the Tier 1 teams that I think are kind of in, but some things could not go their way, but really they control their own destiny. They just got to win 1 to 2 games and keep those points coming. Let's talk about Jason Servos, first down syndrome here. As you can see, Jason is not getting very kind schedule here playing the number 1 team this week. However, it does look like he's projected to win. I still think Dan's going to win that. We'll get to the roundups later at the end of the show. But here's the deal. The worst thing that can happen to everyone who's trying to get in the playoff spots is Dan and Abby and maybe Plow losing. Okay, as long as these guys keep winning and beating teams that need to jock for position, it's the best scenario for pretty much the rest of the league. You see, he has a favorable matchup against Nick, but do not sleep on Nick. At 4-6 there, he still has a long shot to get into the playoffs, and he'll round off the season against Mick, who is also fighting for one of those spots. But Servos currently is sitting in 4th place at 5-5, the top seed for all the 5-5. So right now he's in if the playoffs start today. All right, here's another team that's in the driver's seat but still sits at 5-5 in 5th place. I'm talking about the Clock Gobblers, John Dahlgren. He definitely needs to win this week, as also his opponents for the next 2 weeks are all fighting for those spots. These are all pivotal matchups for Dahlgren. Playing Party Like a Gronk Star this week, who got off to a hot start, Devontae Adams and Russell Wilson, thanks to them. But also he's going to face Joe. Even though Joe's at 4-6, he absolutely has a good shot at getting into the playoffs, at least getting that 6th seed. And then rounding off the 13th week against Mick Barton. That could be a make or break playoff game. I cannot wait until that matchup. So again, Dahlgren's sitting at 5-5. We'll see what happens here, but let's look at the next team. David McCready. How did David McCready get here? Okay, he was at the bottom of the league, and then all of a sudden he shot himself way up. He's got a 5-5 record. He's done really well in the last 5 weeks. Now he's got a really tough matchup against Intentional Pounding. And he's got Dak Street Boys, which is the worst team in the league, but still, Austin has 1,700 points, and he's in last place. It's unreal. He's got more points than half of the people jockeying for that 6th playoff spot. So that's going to be a tough matchup for McCready. And then he has to finish the season playing the number 1 team in the league, Dan Nichols. This is a tough route for Mr. McCready, who's currently sitting at that 6th spot. Can he hold on? Don't think so. But it's going to be interesting to see in the next couple of weeks. And round off the 5-5 kind of bubble teams here, Mick Barton, who's had an up and down season. The only reason he is in 7th place right now is because he is 11th in total points scored. That's 11th, second to last in total points scored. So he's gotten a lot of lucky breaks, unlike me this season. But let's look at Mick's schedule here and see how he's going to get into the playoffs. Playing Alan Nesson this week. At a 4-6, Allen, of course, he's also fighting for the spot. We'll get to him in a minute. And then another 4-6 team who is just crawling and scraping and scrapping to get into the playoffs and party like a Gronk star. The rivalry continues there. And then to finish off the season, this also could be a playoff implication, win and you're in type of scenario with Mick playing John Dahlgren at the very end of the season. Mick 5-5, so legit to quit. Out of all the 5-5 teams, my least likely to make it, I actually would take McCready over Mick just because of the points scored, but anything can happen in the LEG. Okay, now we move on to the long shots here. These are teams that absolutely need to win every single game for the rest of the year. They got to get to 7 wins, and they're going to need some help too to do it. Now, the person that needs the least help is Joe Murdoch here. Joe is actually 4th overall in scoring and still sits at a 4-6 record. So unfortunate for Joe getting scored on a lot here, but he's got a very tough matchup against the Indy Snatch Pounders. This is such a huge game for Joe and McCready, because if Joe wins, he will overstep McCready because of the points, and he will be ahead of McCready there as they both sit at 5-6. So we also got that matchup, and then next week another 5-5 team. John Dahlgren, my goodness, every single game here matters, kids. It's like college football here in the LEG. He's going to take on the Clock Gobblers. And then also Joe gets a pretty nice matchup at the end of the season. This actually might be the thing that gets Joe in if he gets through the gauntlet that is Snatch Pounders and Clock Gobblers. Alright, so now we're moving down the ranks here, down to the 9th spot currently. Alan Nessen, Suspiria. Hopefully anybody knows that reference? Anybody besides myself and Alan? Okay, anyways, moving on. Alan also has one of the toughest remaining schedules left in the LEG. He just had his best game against me, of course, because that's happened all year. But let's look at the remaining schedule for Alan Nessen, who's taking on Mick Barton at 5-5, an absolutely crucial matchup. Again, Alan, because of the points, if he beats Mick, will take over and surpass Mick in the standing. And then next week, he's got Dave Plow at a surprising 6-4. I don't know how Plow has won 6 games this week. It still baffles me. Absolutely baffles me. And then to finish off the season against a very, very tough opponent, the man he calls the champ is going to stand in the way of Alan Nessen as he takes him on in Week 13, a very pivotal matchup. So Alan right now at 4-6 needs to get the wins for the rest of the year and have some help so he can move up. But because of his points at 4-6, he needs Joe to lose. We'll get to those scenarios here in a bit. Now let's move on to me. So as I mentioned already, the team that's been scored on the most actually leads the league in over 1,800 points here for the 2018 season. Party like a Gronk star definitely needs some help because the points on offense have not been coming in steady flows. Saquon Barkley really drives that ship, so when he has a bad game, Party like a Gronk star has a bad game. But projected to win this week against the Clock Gobblers. We shall see. I still think John's going to win that game. But let's look at the remaining schedule for the commish here, taking on John at 5-5. Again, if John loses that game to the commish, John still would be ahead because of the points unless of some kind of explosion for Party like a Gronk star. And then the next week against good old Mickers, 5-5, another pivotal matchup here. So hopefully at this point, if Mick is at 5-6 and the commish is at 5-6, that's a must-win game for both teams. And then to round off the end of the year, hashtag DMAGA, make Derek Carr great again. God, that's what John Gruden's wanting. Stands in the way, and it would just be poetic justice if Plow were to ruin my playoff chances at the very end of the season. So yes, at 4-6, that's a long shot, but there's no bigger long shot than last year's Hoffa winner, Nick Shook. Nick has a pretty brutal schedule. Actually, he has the toughest remaining schedule as far as total wins go for the end of the season these last 3 weeks. And here's why. He's taking on Dave Plow at 6-4. Nick also not getting a lot of points, so he definitely needs not only some wins, but he pretty much needs everyone ahead of him to lose. A very unlikely scenario as the matchups for the last 3 weeks do not add up for him to achieve that. So Nick most likely will not get into the playoffs. A very long shot. But you know what? He plays Jason in Week 12. You can play spoiler here for the rest of the league, as hopefully Austin does as well. That is what a lot of people are counting on, like myself, is for Austin and Nick to completely destroy the teams that they're playing to get the other team in the playoffs. Does that make sense? No, I didn't think so. Anyways, we'll continue. And he finishes the season against second place Abalash Ready Guns and Rosen at 4-6. You know, it's going to be tough. Nick is last place in scoring. So again, an extreme long shot, but everything has to go his way perfectly. But again, because of the matchups, the teams that are playing each other for the remainder of the season, don't think it's going to happen. So I'm going to highlight two teams here in scenarios that it's going to take for them to make the playoffs. Now, points obviously have a big play in this, so that can change some things. But as far as wins, and if every points average stays the same, here's a scenario for Alan Nesson. Listen to this. Alan Nesson has to win out, has to have Jason, David, and Mick all lose 3 in a row, okay? John has to beat me in Week 11, but lose in Week 12 and 13. Then Mick has to lose Week 11, but beat me and Week 12, and lose Week 12, and beat John in Week 13. Are you following along? Also, he needs Joe to win in Week 11 and 12, and lose to Nick in Week 13. Nick has to lose in Week 11, but beat Jason in Week 12, and lose to Avi in Week 13, because he's 4-6. And JD has to lose 11, 12, and 13. He needs me to lose all 3 weeks. What a scenario. Now, let's go to my scenario here. This is another long shot. A lot of things need to happen to go right. I have to win out all 3 games, okay? Jason, John, and McCready have to lose 3 in a row. That's a common theme here. Mick loses weeks 11 and 12, but he has to beat John in that final week. He needs Joe to win in week 11 and 12, but lose in week 13. Alan has to beat Mick in week 11, lose in week 12, but beat Joe in week 13. And Nick has to lose week 11, but beat Jason in week 12, and then lose to Abby in week 13. Holy cow. That's a long shot here, but that's anything could happen here in the LEG. So let's go quickly over the matchups here. Like I said earlier, I like John over me this week. He's going to win. Sons of Shane Falco, not a chance against old D-Maga there, which is good, for as I just mentioned in the scenarios. Dax Street Boys, I don't think they're going to play spoiler this week, which also is a good scenario for Alan and myself for him to lose. Nickel, I think Dan Nickel's going to lose this week. Here's my upset special. I am picking Jason Servos to beat Dan and really screw this whole thing up for the teams that are trying to get in to that final spot. And then this is the game of the week here, Alan versus Mick. This could go either way. What I am envisioning is Alan winning this game over Mick, and that will further give him better chances to make the playoffs in that 6th and final slot. All right. If you're confused, yes. If you fast forward, probably. Okay, well, whatever, we're ending. And thank you for watching. Good luck to everybody in the playoffs this year. I'm your commish, John David Ray. See you next time.